All right. Before we start, I did want to direct your attention to the slide if you require Spanish language interpretation. And I'm going to hand it over to Mark, our interpreter, to give some instructions in Spanish.
Thank you, Classy. Muy buenos días a todos que nos acompañan para el programa de hoy. Queremos dejarles saber que se ofrecen servicios de interpretación. Para escuchar el programa en español, en breve aparecerá un icono de un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice Interpretation o Interpretación. Selecciónelo y de ahí seleccione su idioma Spanish o español y podrá escuchar todo el programa en español. Gracias. And please note, interpretation services are being offered for today's session. To listen to any comments or questions that are given in Spanish, please select the globe icon that will appear at the bottom of your screen momentarily. It says Interpretation, and then select your language, English. You'll then be able to hear a live rendering of any Spanish comment or question given live into English. Thank you, Classy. Back to you.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Great. So my name is Classy Bennett, and I'm a senior environmental scientist at the California Natural Resources Agency. And I manage the California 5th Climate Change Assessment's core climate research program for the agency. This informational webinar is designed to complement the core climate research program's request for proposal, or RFP, that we released in partnership with the California Institute for Energy and the Environment at UC Berkeley and the 5th Assessment team on June 5th. Next slide. First, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping and technology instructions. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see all of your Zoom functions. Please use the Q&A feature to submit questions during the presentation and in the Q&A portion of this webinar. A live transcription can be enabled by clicking the CC icon. And as you just heard, Spanish language interpretation is available by clicking the globe icon. Next slide. This is our agenda for today. We are going to start with some high-level remarks from the agency's Assistant Secretary for Climate Change, and then provide an overview of the 5th assessment. Then I will dive into the specifics of the core climate research program and the recently released RFP. We'll then spend the majority of our time in a Q&A session answering your questions about this newly released RFP. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Jen Phillips, to provide some high-level remarks.
Thank you, Classy. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this call. It's so great to see so many of you on the line and have you be part of this process. So as Classy mentioned, I am Jen Phillips, and I serve as Assistant Secretary for Climate Change at the California Natural Resources Agency. So all of you on this call know all too well that our climate crisis is here in California, and we are truly on the front lines of climate change. We also know that climate change really transcends boundaries and our geographies and across so many communities. So really, we need to continue in California to rely on novel and cutting-edge solutions that bring everyone to the table. And the 5th Climate Change Assessment is just that. It's a really important moment to bring the best science to bear on some of our toughest climate adaptation questions in California. We have really been prioritizing climate solutions for many years in California, and recently we've invested historic levels of money to really reduce climate risks, and we see that these investments are already paying off. We also know that we need to continue to move faster and scale these solutions even further. And again, this 5th Climate Change Assessment is an opportunity to think about the best solutions to tackle our climate crisis here in California. As many of you on this line know, California has long been a leader on climate mitigation, and the approaches have truly been built upon the best available science. But also, as of late and in the recent years, we are really, really focused in California, and with this administration to protect people and nature from the impacts of climate change and build our resilience to the impacts of climate change. So just as much as we're trying to drive down emissions and get to carbon neutral as fast as possible, we are equally prioritizing building our resilience to climate change in California and reducing risks for all Californians. As I've mentioned now a couple times, the 5th Climate Change Assessment is a key pillar of California's leadership on building climate resilience and reducing risks for all Californians. This is obviously not the first climate assessment we've had, and our climate change assessments have really over the years been designed to answer these critical questions on climate change and highlight pathways to bolster resilience across our many diverse communities in California. We hope with this assessment that we're going to really be able to understand answers to these really pressing science questions, and in order to be able to best prepare for and respond to the current and future impacts of climate change. This assessment and our California climate change assessment process in general really underscores and highlights California's commitment to basing our policy decisions and our programmatic decisions on the best available science. And it really does highlight also that in order to tackle climate change in California, we are going to need to continue to rely on unprecedented collaboration and transformational change. So I'm so excited about all that this team has done so far with this 5th climate change assessment and how it builds on and strengthens our climate assessment process. And I'm really encouraged to see so many of you on the line that are eager to learn more about this request for proposals and hopefully design project concepts that really tackle and address some of our big challenges in California and present solutions that can be scaled and also translated to decision-making and our most urgent policy decisions in California. So thanks for the opportunity, Klesi, and thank you all again for your partnership and looking forward to continuing to work with you in the years ahead.
Well, thank you, Jen and Klesi. My name is Nimatuka. I'm the program manager for California's 5th Climate Change Assessment. Go back, please. I'd like to provide some overall context about California's climate change assessments and the scope of work that will make up the suite of resources provided through California's 5th Climate Change Assessment. So for a little bit of background, California's climate change assessments are both a process and a series of products that contribute to the scientific foundation for understanding climate-related vulnerability at the regional and local scale, while also informing state policies, plans, programs, and guidance on resilience and adaptation actions. With the passage of Senate Bill 1320 in 2020, sponsored by Senator Stern, California's 5th Climate Change Assessment is building on the strengths and closing some of the gaps of previous assessments. Next slide, please. As we mentioned, we're building on a long history of California assessments, starting with the first Climate Impacts Report from the Energy Commission in 1989. Since 2006, at the direction of Executive Order S-305, the state has completed 4 comprehensive climate change assessments designed to assess the impacts and risks from climate change to inform policy actions. The first 2 assessments focused on understanding climate change and statewide impacts. The 3rd and 4th assessments began to examine the nuances of regional impacts. And in the chat, you can access the link to the 4th assessment's various technical synthesis and summary reports. Next slide. California's climate change assessments are now implemented on a 5-year timeline, led by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, in partnership with the California Natural Resources Agency, the California Energy Commission, and the Strategic Growth Council. We work with many additional partners, including other state agencies, research institutions, tribes, community organizations, local and regional government entities, and others to define and implement the scope of this assessment research. Next slide, please. The fifth assessment will produce a suite of research and tools to report the impacts and risks of climate change based on the best available science. These include new climate data and scenarios, projecting the impacts of climate change in California, the next generation of projections that align with the coupled model intercomparison project phase 6, CMIP 6, and models to understand wildfire risk, hydrologic changes, and projected sea level rise. Original climate research that addresses California-specific research needs and questions related to climate change, including a suite of reports on energy sector applications and another complementary consideration. This includes research conducted as well as CEC-funded research projects focused on the energy sector. A tribal research program to support tribal collaboration, tribal expertise, and participation in California Native American tribes throughout the fifth assessment process. This includes a grant program and a newly established tribal advisory group. A suite of regional, topical, and statewide synthesis reports that prioritize equity in the translation of cutting-edge research and data to meet the informational needs of communities across the state. And a dedicated, sustained, and equity-centered engagement process throughout the entire timeline to ensure that this information drives climate action on the ground. Next slide, please. The fifth assessment is operating on a 5-year timeline, culminating in mid-2026. The assessment will be rolling out new climate projections data throughout this year. Climate projection data, dynamic award, and LOCA 2 hybrid downscaling of CMIP 6 global climate models are already available or will be made publicly available in Q3 of 2023 through the CalAdapt Analytics Engine, as research teams complete their modeling efforts and data products are formatted and ingested into the Analytics Engine platform in a manner that supports cloud compute and includes appropriate metadata. Additionally, hydrologic modeling scenarios and sea level rise scenarios will be available later in 2023, and wildfire modeling scenarios will be available in mid-2024. Where these data are relevant and appropriate for proposed research, the fifth assessment team can help facilitate access. Where additional supplemental existing data or collection of new data are needed to address informational gaps not fulfilled by the provided fifth assessment projections and modeling data, research proposals for this RFP may suggest alternative data sources, including justification for the use of these data. Original research is already underway through the CEC, focusing on climate impacts and the energy sector. The research conducted in response to this RFP, along with a forthcoming opportunity for tribal grant programs, will complete the suite of original climate research. At the start of next year, we will launch into the production of synthesis and summary reports. These will incorporate the data, modeling, and original research previously mentioned and synthesize key findings from the original research conducted through the fifth assessment into regionally focused reports. Our goals for the development of those reports are to support a community-led process and produce actionable products that synthesize statewide climate issues and uplift local priorities. While some of these products will be released on a rolling basis by mid-2026, the complete suite of research and informational resources will be made available to the public. And now back to my colleague Klessie for more on the RFP.
Great, thank you, Neil. So the core climate research program will fund critical climate change research that fill demonstrable gaps in the scientific literature related to understanding and adapting to climate impacts. The request for proposal for this program was released on June 5th, and we'll place a link to this RFP in the chat. Under this competitive program, we expect to receive a range of proposed budgets. There's up to approximately $5.5 million to support a series of research contracts. This is expected to fund around 20 to 30 different proposals. We're not setting any minimum or maximum award amounts under the solicitation, as we want to create the opportunity to fund a range of projects, such as smaller projects that are leveraging other funds, or perhaps even larger critical projects. The solicitation is open to all public and private entities, including but not limited to academic institutions, private research institutions, local, state, and federal government entities, California Native American tribes, nonprofits, non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations, and individuals. It is also worth noting that individual researchers can submit or be a part of multiple proposals, but can only act as the lead researcher or principal investigator for one awarded project. To be considered eligible, applicants will need to indicate which climate research topic or CRT that they are proposing to address. In 2022, the Fifth Assessment Project team collected input from more than 200 individuals representing state and local governments, business, academic institutions, nonprofits, tribal communities, and the general public. Responses included over 600 proposed climate research topics for consideration in the Fifth Assessment. With support from subject matter experts, this list was refined to the 26 research topics that are included in the RFP, and I believe a link to these topics was also placed in the chat. The scopes of these topics are broad. While in alignment with the broader topics in the list, proposed research projects under this RFP may be narrower in scope. Alternatively, proposals can also propose to address more than one CRT. We will not necessarily fund every CRT through the solicitation, and it is possible that we could fund more than one proposal for a single topic, as some of these topics are quite broad and contain multiple subtopics that can be explored in a variety of manners. Researchers may also propose topics that are not reflected in the list of CRTs. In these cases, the proposal must demonstrate how the proposed topic fills a gap in research needed to better understand climate change impacts, trends, and events in California, and/or potential actions to adaptively respond to these changes and to build resilience throughout the state. Next slide. This slide includes the various components required to submit an application under this RFP. The RFP further specifies the formatting and the page limit requirements for each of these components, as well as any required templates. The templates are included as attachments on the RFP website that was placed in the chat earlier. Next slide. The proposal review will consist of two phases. First, a pass-fail administrative evaluation will be used to determine if the proposal was submitted on time, is complete, and meets eligibility requirements. In addition to eligible applicant type and eligible research, which I just touched on, this evaluation will also include reviewing for eligible costs. Eligible costs will include direct costs such as salaries, fringe benefits, travel, and materials, and indirect costs such as rental space, utilities, payroll, and accounting. Those that pass the administrative evaluation will then move on to a technical evaluation that's out of 100 possible points. The final selection and awards will be made based on the highest scoring proposals. It's also worth noting here that there is no requirement for cost share, and cost share will not be taken into consideration for the technical evaluation and scoring phase. Next slide. This slide contains key dates related to the RFP, and it's also included in the RFP itself. But there are a few I'd like to call to your attention. The RFP was released on June 5th. On June 20th, we will post questions and answers on the RFP, and these will be posted to the site where the RFP currently lives. Proposals must be submitted by July 17th at 5 p.m. We're aiming to wrap our proposal review by August 28th and make awards shortly after. We anticipate that research projects will start between mid-September and the end of October. All funded research under this RFP must be completed no later than the third quarter of 2025, and this encompasses a review period for each of the research reports. Next slide. So again, the proposals must be submitted by July 17th by 5 p.m. Proposals and any questions should be submitted via email to the email address listed on this slide, and we'll place that email address in the chat as well. The email subject line should follow the formatting instructions that are included in the RFP. Next slide. So with that, we'll turn to the Q&A portion of our webinar. Please place your questions in the Q&A feature on your Zoom taskbar. We will answer as many as we can. If we cannot answer a question at this time, we will post it in an FAQ on the 20th. All right, so we will move into our questions and answers now. Okay, so I see a question coming in. Can PIs be based at academic institutions outside of California? I can take that one. The answer is yes, if the research is focused on California. For the next question, I'm going to call on my colleagues from OPR. One speaker talked about a tribal grant program. Does this include California Indian-led nonprofits? Is the RFP available for this program?
Tribally led organizations are eligible for both programs. The tribal grant program is only available for tribes and tribally led organizations. And we can provide contact information for the tribal grant program.
All right, thank you, Neil. The next question says, obviously, if we propose a project at something like 2 million, that will make it hard for you to fund 20 to 30 projects. It would have been very helpful if you had given us a max limit as a guide for the sizes of our projects. Why not set a max? We did not set a max or a minimum award because we wanted to retain flexibility in what we were funding, recognizing that there are a lot of different needs out there. There's a lot of different projects out there. And we didn't want to preclude ourselves from funding a large project that may meet several of our topics and needs, or a smaller project that's just in need of one piece of their funding puzzle. So for the next question, I'm going to call on Eric from the CIEE, who's helping us administer this program. It says, for indirect costs, is there a cap for UC, CSU universities?
Thank you, Klesi. Yes, there is a cap for the indirect cost for UC and CSU campuses. The prime contract between CNRA and CIEE was approved with the 25% indirect cost rate, which stays in effect for the duration of a multi-year project. And so confirming that there is a cap of 25% for those UC and CSU campuses applying.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, I have another indirect rate cost that's related. It says, is the indirect rate cap across all types of organizations, or does the rate cap only apply to UC university campuses?
The rate cap that's indicated in the RFP of 25%, that is only applicable to UC and CSU campuses at this time.
Thank you. The next question is, can a single institution submit multiple grant proposals? I'll just note that they're contracts, not grants, but yes, a single institution can submit multiple proposals. And as we noted, a single individual can only serve as the lead researcher or principal investigator for one awarded projects. The next question I can take as well, can for-profit companies be a part of proposals? Yes, for-profit companies can be a part of proposals or can be the sole proposer under this program. All right, another question here that I can take. Want to double check, are groups that are part of the CNRA, that's the California Natural Resources Agency, eligible to apply? Yes, our departments are eligible to apply. If your team is applying, you won't be eligible to be a reviewer of applications, but CNRA and other state entities are eligible applicants. All right, the next question is, can the proposal involve research that requires field work and new data gathering? Yes, that is allowed here. Okay. The next question, perhaps maybe myself and Eric and Neil can all weigh in here. It's a bit of a multi-person question. Is it acceptable to contact Program Manager Neil Matuka to make sure our proposed projects are in line with the program priorities? My sense is, Neil, I defer to you on personal contact, but we have published the priorities, the research priorities within the CRT list. So would really defer people to that. And mentioning that the RFP includes several links to state climate priorities that we encourage you to look at as you are drafting your proposals. But Neil, I'll pass it to you if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I would. I feel it would be better to not reach out to me. I will likely be part of the evaluation and reviewers. So since this is a competitive process, talking with me about your project may result in being disqualified from being able to apply. So I would not do that.
Thank you, Neil. So the next question is this the first time this program is being rolled out? If not, are there examples of successful proposals from the previous round? I can start that answer and then I'll pass it to Neil. There was a similar program in the fourth assessment that CNRA managed. The selection of research topics was a little different. They were a little bit more pinpointed rather than allowing for proposers to suggest their own research topics. And perhaps we can get a link to the fourth assessment core technical reports in the chat. Those are the reports that were produced from that program in the fourth assessment. Neil, do you want to add anything there?
No, I think that's good. I think really looking at the previous technical, what were called technical reports at the time is going to be the best resource that we have at this point.
All right, where can we access the recording of this webinar? This webinar will be posted on the same website where the RFP is currently posted, and perhaps we can get another link to that in the chat. I know it's been posted earlier, but maybe we can drop that in again. The next question, oh, thank you, Natalie. The next question is, how and when will reviewers be recruited? Reviewers will be recruited first from state agency experts who work on various related scientific or technical programs that relate to the various topics. We've done a few informal kind of interest gathering calls, and we will be putting out some more formal calls to internal state agencies very soon. So if you are on the line and you are interested in being a reviewer and you work at a state agency, just be looking out for that. All right, the next question is for Eric. Department of Energy national laboratories have indirect costs more than 25%. Are these labs eligible to apply?
I'm confirming that the 25% cap on IDC rates does not apply to national labs. So yes, you are eligible to apply.
Great, thank you, Eric. All right, looks like we had that same question. Just to be super extra clear, does the indirect cost cap apply to national labs? No, is your answer. All right, I'm also gonna pass the next one to Eric. What are your reporting expectations through the tenure of the contract?
Reporting wise, selected project teams will be required to submit progress reports. A template will be provided to those who are successfully executed with the subcontract. Progress reports will include things of the nature of reporting hours and effort months towards tasks in a given period. Quarterly reports, as it states, is on a quarterly basis, but that may change to monthly depending on what the needs are of your state assigned technical project manager.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
The next question is, can a team member be from another country where the PI is in California? The international researcher is an expert on the proposed area. Also, can the international collaborator receive some funding for performing the research? Eric, do you want to weigh in on this one as well?
Let's see. So the question is, can a team member from another country, but PI is in California, international researcher is an expert in proposed area? We'll have to take a look at that when it comes in. I want to provide a thorough response in the Q&A that we'll post online. So please be on the lookout for that and we'll respond to it there.
Thank you. Okay. This next question I will pass on to Neil. Is there an expectation that the research reports funded by this program will be included / published as part of the 5th assessment core technical reports?
Thank you. Yes, so that is the goal of this RFP, is to produce a suite of research similar to what was called the core technical reports in the previous assessments. We're not calling it the core technical reports this time, but that is the same idea. We want to create that same suite of research. So to the extent that they are reports, they will go through a review process and be published in the same way by the assessment. If they are not a report, then it would be included in the appropriate name.
All right. The next question, I'm also gonna pass to Neil. This is very related. Is there an expectation that funded projects will produce a technical report to appear in the 5th assessment?
Yeah, I think that is the general goal, is that these produce reports or documents that address these types of questions or knowledge gaps. Historically, they have not always been just a report, but I think our primary goal is to produce these types of documents that can then be used by other agencies and used in the other products of the assessment.
Great, thank you, Neil. I'm also going to pass the next one to you. Are proposals that aim at contributing to the California assessment report valued more than new research that does not necessarily go into the California climate change assessment report?
Yeah, that is a good question. So a couple of clarifications. One is that there's not a single report. So this likely refers to the statewide summary report. But our goal is that any research topic that has been identified through the climate, as one of the climate research topics, contributes to the assessment in terms of the overall process and filling knowledge gaps that we've identified. We would expect that any research that answers some part of those questions or addresses any of those questions would be incorporated in some way. It addressing one of those questions, I think, is the value in and justification that it has contributed. Whether or not it will be cited in one of the reports, I do not believe will be a factor in evaluating, because we have not written those reports.
Thanks, Neil. The next question I'll take, the question says, this is a statewide program. Will you give a higher value to projects that cover multiple regions or even the entire state? That is not a specific scoring criteria, as you can see in the RFP. We recognize that there are some regional ecosystems, regional infrastructure that are of statewide importance, and whether it's statewide economic importance, statewide safety importance. So no, I don't envision that if a project has it's focused on a regional, has a regional focus that has statewide importance, that it would be penalized in any way. Okay, the next question, I'm interested in having Neil and Eric weigh in on. It says, regarding the project end date, does the 3rd quarter end on September 30th, 2025? And can there be a possibility for no cost extensions after that time? So maybe Neil, you can weigh in on the larger timeline at play here, and Eric, any contract specific contributions you'd want to add?
Yeah, thank you. So from a big picture perspective, the September 30th, 2025 deadline is really important for us because if work isn't done by then, we won't be able to release it as part of the fifth assessment because our funding runs out mid-2026. And that September 30th deadline is really to make sure that by the time we start, we're finalizing our synthesis and summary report, that there's at least preliminary results that they can use from this round of research. So in the interest of making sure that our synthesis and summary reports are able to rely on this latest round of the newest research that's very relevant to California, we want to make sure that it's done by September 30th. I will let Eric answer the contract specific things, but I would say there would have to be an incredibly compelling reason to want to do an extension after that.
And I'll just chime in contractually, if there is such a compelling reason to extend the project beyond that September 30th end date, we're in position to do so at the direction of the state.
Thank you both. The next question I can take: can authors publish the funded research separately in scientific journals as well as submitting a report? Yes. Answer is yes there. The next,
if I may,
oh yeah.
Historically, we have asked that they be that if they're going to be published in scientific journals, that is after they have been published as part of the assessment. So for now, we would probably still ask that, although we're evaluating that publication policy now.
Thank you for that clarification, Neil. Next one I'm also going to give to you. Is there an expectation or hope that projects will utilize the CMIP6 data and other data products already developed under the 5th climate change assessment by the CalAdapt enterprise?
Yes, thank you. So the answer would be yes, and are in the sense that if projects are going to use this type of climate data for which we have California specific data that or models that have been produced already, that we would want to make sure that ours are the ones being used. If your project does not need CMIP6 data or other data products that have already been assessed, that either use a different one or doesn't need that type of data product, then there's no need to incorporate that product.
Great, thank you. I have a related question here about access to this data. So the question is, can you post a link to where we can find these California specific resources, e.g. LOCA?
Yes, we can provide, we'll provide links and information about access to the data.
Okay, another related data use question. You mentioned hydrological and fire models are under development. Many other groups in California use their own models. To what extent will those be permitted?
I think that we are open to other data sources, especially those that are supplemental or where it's new data. So to the extent that they are different from our own, we're very open to that. Our goal is to make sure that where data is used that we have already produced as part of the assessment, that it is our data is used, and that is for continuity across state agencies and across products. So that is the limitation.
Thank you, Neil. Right. The next question is, are workforce training and or mitigation implementation a part of the climate research topics that address workplace hazards? I think we're open to seeing your interpretation of the topics. They are broad on purpose, and the funding is for research. It's not for project implementation, so we wouldn't necessarily want to see, you know, some infrastructure building or anything, but I think research related to workforce training or mitigation could fall under some of those topics. Another question for Neil here. Did staff ask for output to be published in a fifth assessment report before it is published in a journal? This may result in rejection by the journal on grounds of self-plagiarism.
So just to clarify, we are asking that work that is funded through this type of process, that it be published as part of the fifth assessment, regardless of whether or not it is incorporated into one of these summary or synthesis reports, before it is submitted to a journal.
Thank you, Neil. I have another question for Eric. Do the applications need to be submitted via a sponsored programs office at a UC, for example?
Yes, if teams are applying from UC campuses, they should apply through their sponsored projects office.
Thank you very much. Okay, so there's another question here. Gonna read it. If a proposal focuses on research and implementation science, e.g. to leverage what community-based organizations across California are already doing to support people with mental health challenges and bringing a climate adaptation lens to that work, would that fall within the bounds of what you might consider funding? Mental health is listed in your CRTs. I'm wondering if implementation science is appropriate here. Yes, I think we are interested in understanding research about implementation. Several of the CRTs include a component about assessing implementation, understanding the efficacy of implementation, and so yeah, I think that would be allowed here if it fits within one of the CRTs. We have a question here asking whether a literature review would be accepted as a proposal or a research project type, and yes, literature reviews are allowed. I have a question here. I think I will bring it to Neil. Really wondering about the fifth assessment emphasis on future climate versus historical periods, and which one is really the focus here.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, the assessment is forward looking. So our goal is to look at the future impacts, to the impacts and the future impacts that we're looking at in terms of California, and less about historical.
Thank you very much. We have another question here about an international applicant. Can a Canadian institute participate in a team collaborating with a Californian entity? This is similar to another question earlier and one that we will address in our posted FAQs by the 20th. All right. If we didn't answer your question today, that means that we need some more time to come up with a response. And we will see those posted by the 20th. I did want to end with, oh, it looks like we got a couple more questions here. Sorry. Will there be an effort to distribute awards across CRTs, or will you strictly take the top scored applications as ranked by the reviewers? Yes, there is an ability for us to consider funding as many research topics as possible and funding across geographies and meeting other admin priorities. And you'll see statements to that extent reflected in the RFP and the scoring section. All right, will it be possible to submit more questions after today? And will the FAQs be updated after June 20th? We often encounter important questions closer to the deadline. Eric, I'm going to pass that to you.
Thank you. Yes, more questions are certainly possible to submit after today to the email that was indicated in the slide deck and dropped in the chat. Will FAQs be updated after June 20th? If we receive questions that are substantial enough that it benefits that everyone be knowledgeable of them, we may issue an addenda to the FAQs.
Thank you, Eric. So I'll take the next question. Just want to make sure that we are supposed to include one or more than two CRTs into one proposal. You only need to address one CRT per proposal. You can address more than one if your project combines multiple aspects of different CRTs. But we did want to clarify that if you are submitting more than one proposal, a single person can only be lead researcher or PI for one funded project. Okay. So the last question here is, thank you for the helpful webinar. What about questions that come up after today's session? We just mentioned that, and perhaps we can also drop in the link again where the FAQ is going to be posted. Please look out for the answers to your questions there. Again, if we did not answer something in today's webinar, we need a bit more time to come together as a team to answer. So with that, I'll go to the last slide here. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. If you would like to join the email list for the 5th assessment, that link is being put in the chat along with the links on the slide to the RFP, to the email, and to the general 5th assessment webpage. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we're very excited to see your proposals.